Hi there, I'm Yasir. This is the brief on my YouTube channel. Today we will discuss the unfolding situation in the Middle East with a particular focus on US Iran situation. As we know that last night, after frantic efforts, Pakistan was successful in brokering a ceasefire between United States and Iran. So far, a 14-day pause has been agreed, with negotiations starting in the coming days in Islamabad. America so far has finalized its delegation as well. The Strait of Hormuz, one of the bone of contention, as per the latest reports, is gradually opening, and the strikes as of now have also stopped. Now, I'm going to cover two things in this podcast. Number one, what Pakistan actually did and how it pulled it off, which, according to a lot of diplomats, a lot of experts, they say it's something magnanimous. And also, I would be discussing what it means for the region, to the overall diplomatic fraternity in the region, diplomatic realignment in the region, and also what Pakistan must do moving forward. Now, before we discuss the core areas, it is worth sharing that the global response to this ceasefire has been mostly positive, except from the usual capital, which in Pakistan's case is New Delhi. So the South Bloc in India seems in complete disarray. They initially downplayed it. They basically underestimated Pakistan's role and went to the extent that they resorted to some profanities to describe Pakistan's role. But the international community seems relieved at the fact that there is now a 14-day of peace, which they believe has the potential to extend if both parties will negotiate in good faith. So they have been appreciative of Pakistan's role. So now let's on to the big questions. How did Pakistan pull this off? It is important to know this and to contextualize it, because most of the analysis we see on the media, on social media, left and right, they seem to be off the mark. Moving forward, it's crucial to understand that, unlike most mediators, Pakistan didn't just offer Islamabad as a meeting venue and hoped, best of luck, or wished best of luck for both the parties. It served as a primary back channel between Washington and Tehran over the past several weeks before reaching at some sort of agreement. So there was a back and forth for weeks for the reason that Iran didn't or does not communicate with most Western allied states anymore because of past bitter experiences. The United States under the current administration has very limited capacity for sensitive back-channel diplomacy in the region. It used to have a huge scope in the past, but it no longer is the case. So that brought Pakistan into the equation and created the space for a conversation that couldn't have happened anywhere else. So Pakistan didn't just open the door, basically. It had to build one where there was none existed. Also, another crucial aspect, the Pakistani approach was focused on something really simple, and which was very interesting for me as a student of international relations. I don't know what sort of pragmatism was there, what sort of approach was there, but the fact that there wasn't any grand ambition made these negotiations very simple, yet very doable. Now, they were interested in finding the common ground first. They were not trying to resolve everything at once and leave the maximalist approach to the face situation between the Iranians and the Americans. So Islamabad worked to find in ways that both can agree on it in the short term and build from there with a simple goal. That was, let's stop attacking each other. Let's, stop making things worse in the GCC region, and let's basically stop the killing because it was going to spiral out of the control. So the idea was one step at a time and one important step after another. And that's, I think, is practical diplomacy, which surprisingly Pakistan was able to pull off. So because the alternative was continued war and destruction. So the idea was, Pakistan's approach was, don't solve anything, just stop the bleeding fast and let's start talking. So that was the right approach, personally, as a student of international relations and as someone who was keenly following this development. And frankly enough, I wasn't really hopeful of the negotiations where Pakistan was the interlocutor. Now, also, Pakistan just did not make Islam or Pakistan as the only key. So that was strategic, as it made it a regional affair. It worked with a wider region, not just the two main parties, Iran and United States, but Pakistan engaged the Gulf states, in particular Saudi Arabia, the UAE as well, and made the case that being pulled deeper into this conflict wasn't in their interest. And surprisingly enough, they were able to. Pakistan was able to basically convince its own key allies that the nature of this conflict is not in their best interest, or stepping into the bandwagon wouldn't be in the best interest of the GCC region. And most crucially, it used its defense relationship with Saudi Arabia as a diplomatic leverage, which was very interesting. It reminded regional governments that what happens when outside powers push smaller states to keep fighting wars that aren't theirs to win. The coalition worked, and it created a condition where a ceasefire became possible and a preferred choice for all the parties. And of course, there are reservations, which are manageable reservations. And moving forward, the ceasefire became mostly a desire of all the parties who had vested interest in this conflict. So Pakistan just didn't mediate between two powers. It shifted the entire regional calculus, bringing in more partners, more allies, and making it a regional affair. So it was an interesting move. Also, so another crucial aspect and another crucial question which is being asked and being debated as well, but the reasons, the rationale for it is often missed. That why was Pakistan able to pull this off while others did not even try? Pakistan was not among the countries, or not even the top 10, who would have been in a position to negotiate on the first day of the war. In fact, all eyes were on the United Nations, on the P5, on the European Union, or GCC, or all other actors. For me personally, more than anything else, and this is something which was missed, Pakistan has the appetite which many regions or many countries that do not have. It is Pakistan's risk-taking attitude. It is a desire, and a willingness to take the risk in a geopolitically hostile situation. Most countries in a volatile situation like this, choose the safer path. They put out a statement. They call for calm. They call for negotiations. They don't actually commit, their credibility to brokering something that might fail publicly. So they're more concerned about reputation, which Pakistan wasn't. Pakistan committed and it delivered. So it was, a risk-taking mindset in Rawalpindi and Islamabad, which Pakistan is known for, by the way. So they brought the US and China together back in the 70s, and I think they took the leaf out of it, and they thought that if we can bring two giants together, we can certainly give it a shot in this particular situation as well. So while others issued statements, Pakistan made the call, so which was very unexpected, and which I wasn't sure that Pakistan would go to that extent. And the second most important reason in all of this, which I consider another crucial factor, is China. Pakistan has a strategic relationship with Beijing that most Gulf mediators or even the European mediators, they don't have. I think it's one of the most dynamic relationships in the world when it's about Beijing and Islamabad. It enjoys cordial ties with Beijing, Tehran, and Washington, and interestingly, all at the same time, which is not a conventional approach of states while conducting foreign policy. There's always either a China or United States, or there is always some sort of preferential relationship with other. But Pakistan, surprisingly enough, has maintained this delicate balance between Beijing, Washington, and also, one of Washington's nemesis, that is Iran. So it was an interesting and a unique position to be in. So China's position matters enormously in this conflict, given its association with Pakistan, and also because China has been keeping the Iranian economy running. This is an interesting point, an interesting understanding. The more I digged over it, I realized that there is enormous Chinese leverage on Iran. Now, roughly close to 400 billion investment is there in Iran in the shape of, because China is the largest buyer of Iranian oil, Iran's most important economic partner, basically overall. But to use such leverage, because China has a habit of staying away from conflicts, staying aloof. There was only one country which could have pulled China out of this indifference, and that was only Pakistan. So Pakistan was able to push China to use its economic leverage and ask Iran, push Iran, force Iran to basically join the negotiating table, because there's a lot at stake economically, politically for China. They didn't want to see another disaster at their backyards, and also another basically dent to their supply lines from the Middle East. So, which contributed to Iran's willingness to negotiate. So, Pakistan holds the rare combination of being Beijing's heir and Tehran's trust, which no other state can have at the same time. So, this was one crucial reason that Pakistan was able to leverage. Now, another aspect to it is Pakistan's relationship with Washington. Like I mentioned previously, Pakistan was having this dynamic relationship with China, with Washington, and at the same time had good relationship with Washington's nemesis, which is Tehran. So they were able to utilize this and also leverage this, because Pakistan's defense establishment, Pakistan's CDF primarily, they enjoy strong military-to-military ties with Iran, with Washington, with CIA, with Pentagon, with White House. So they were able to leverage this. Now, the long-standing security relationship with the CIA and with the Pentagon, I believe, was central to this, in Pakistan emerging as the key player. So that placed Islamabad at the center stage. So when Washington basically needed a quiet channel, a trustable channel, there was only one country that they would call, and it was certainly Pakistan, especially given the kind of Trump diplomacy which is taking over the world, which is taking over the Washington. So I think they only had one channel which could have keep things subtle, but at the same time deliver what America wanted, but was too not so willing to ask for it publicly, which was seeking an off ramp. Now, another crucial aspect, this is also equally important, which was to do with Pakistan's own national interests. Pakistan's energy needs, Pakistan's supply lines. Pakistan is in the middle of an energy crisis from many years. It needs oil and gas to run its economy. It needs the Strait of Hormuz open for this. And regional stability is vital for their economic necessity. So Pakistan being at the forefront made sense. It was in their national interest to do so. So Pakistan's reasons were obvious. They needed the region stable. They needed the energy. They needed their 4 million workers in the Gulf to be safe, because they are the mainstay of Pakistan's economy. And yeah, so Pakistan's national interest and global stability happened to point exactly in the same direction, which was Islamabad being the center of it, the center of diplomacy. Now, all of this made an off-ramp through Islamabad not just possible, but logical, because there was a lot of confluence of interest, trust, and basically a preference to have a platform where all mutual insecurities can be addressed under one roof. So Islamabad crucially became that one spot. Now, another crucial aspect of this issue was there was a mutual desire for an off-ramp. Now, people would call it, the Americans in Washington would say, no, the off-ramp or the ceasefire request came from Iran. The Iranians would say, no, it came from the United States. But practically, if you see at the situation, it was a mutual desire. But they were just not shy, or just, they didn't want it to be seen as weak while demanding or seeking an off-ramp. And it's also understandable, because whenever tactical damages, the strikes caused by the US and Israel, they didn't deliver the intended results. So the broader strategic objective were not being achieved. And when a military campaign, and this has been historically the case, when a military campaign, starts failing on its own terms, that's where the space for diplomacy emerges. So the stated goals were broadly, to degrade Iran's military capacity, to stop its nuclear program, and to create conditions for regime change. And none of that seemed to have worked for both Israel and America. So they needed an off-ramp. So on the first goal, we see that Iran kept on striking Tel Aviv. The striking ability of Iran, while was irregular, but it was established that they still had the firepower to hit Tel Aviv whenever they wanted. On regime change, it was established that the regime was not as weak as the people thought it was. And if anything, it emboldened the regime to be more assertive in their conduct. And also, the nature and the scope of the attacks were such that it drastically altered the public opinion within Iran against the intervention they were seeing on their country. So, if anything, this made the Iranians more nationalist. They made the Iranians more pro-regime, and they made them guardians of their own country's territorial integrity and sovereignty. And they were able to see that the destruction is infrastructural. The destruction is more about crippling Iran as a state. It wasn't doing much harm to the regime. So it was natural for the masses to rally behind the government, regardless of whether they like it or not, but it was more about their country. So that was a perfect that was something which was a setback to both Tel Aviv and Washington, because the assumption that removing the leadership would cause the system to collapse, it has never worked, and it never will. So the Iranian government, while is unpopular within its own people, which is true, which there is no doubt about that, but a government being unpopular is not being as fragile. So a sustained external military intervention basically pushes the population towards the government, not away from them. So this is exactly what happened in Iran. So by the time Pakistan's diplomatic channel became available, both sides had real reasons to use it. Iran, for that matter, because of the military pressure, was serious, even if the strategic goals were unreachable, even when they were able to protect their territorial integrity and were fighting back really well. They also wanted a ceasefire. They also wanted this to end because they didn't want their country to be destructed beyond repair. The United States became, because of the campaign, were not delivering what had been promised, was also looking for an off-ramp. So this is the moment Pakistan stepped in. And both wanted it, yet neither was willing to be the first one to do so. So that's where Pakistan's role became extremely crucial. Now, so a crucial aspect as things move forward. So what does the ceasefire would actually mean as the situation unfolds? So for now, in the immediate terms, we see the Strait of Hormuz is reopening. So it's going to stabilize the oil markets and global economy. The Gulf states that were caught in the conflict, they didn't want this to go on as well. So now they can basically regroup and work, get back to fixing their economy and infrastructure as well. But the biggest meaning is about how regional diplomacy works going forward. And this is something interesting for me as well, because each crisis, as we had read in the past, creates different sort of opportunities and blocks. And in this case, it has proved that thinking and that mindset true. So what Pakistan has shown in that is that there are now working diplomatic blocks. So in the shape of Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Pakistan, that when these countries coordinate, create diplomatic space, the United States and its traditional partners cannot create on their own. So these countries now have the potential to design something in the Middle East, which will be a win-win for all the parties and which will be crucial in playing a role in the conflict. So that's a real shift. And also, when people have asked who can mediate in the Middle East crisis, the answer has usually been a group of regional states like European powers, like the UN Security Council. But now we see that there is an increasingly bigger players or relevant players or indigenous players, I call them, led by Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, etc. So these countries are now diplomatic forces which will see more assertiveness, more diplomatic interventions in all future conflicts. And that also changed, who matters in the future crisis. It changes who gets the phone call when things start escalating again. And it also changes how Pakistan thinks about its own place in regional diplomacy. Now, I mean, all these details, this is not to paint some sort of idealism. I also want it to be a little practical here. This is a ceasefire, not a settlement. The underlying disagreements haven't gone away. Iran's proposal includes the right to enrich uranium, the removal of sanctions. The United States wants Iran to dismantle its nuclear stockpiles and accept limits on its ballistic missiles program. Those positions are far apart. The ceasefire could break down. It's a possibility. There are people on multiple sides who would prefer it to fail. There are sabotages. There will be many who would want this thing to go down the drain. And the 14 days is not a peace agreement. So we have to look at it from a point of caution as well. But then again, the flip side of it is, as people say, it's just a ceasefire, or even I say this, what is the alternative as to undermine Pakistan's peace efforts by people who are not? A simple question: what would be done instead then? Because the alternative was a perpetual war. There was no better outcome. And the continuity of war would have been disastrous. And eventually Pakistan would have jumped in. Many other countries would have jumped in. So it would have, from becoming a regional affair, it would have been an international affair. The stakes were too high for this, and the consequences of this would have been disastrous. So now, another crucial aspect of this. So where does things go from here? We know that negotiations are going to start in the coming days, but I think Pakistan needs to be realistic about what it has and hasn't achieved. It has opened the window. It hasn't resolved the dispute. The negotiations in Islamabad are starting in days. But the crucial conversation would be whether Pakistan can start a conversation. But it would be like whether it can keep the conversation going on when the difficult questions will arise, when the demands will be negotiated, when there will be back and forth again regarding what can be compromised on or what cannot be compromised on. Iran will come up with its proposals. The United States will come with its red lines. The gap between them is too wide. It's too big. There will be few things will be non-negotiable. And that's where Pakistan's role become again crucial. It has to, rally around again, bring in the relevant quarters, rob in China, Saudi Arabia, and other vital actors, and make sure that the gap does not become the reason either side walks out and goes back to war, because that would be disastrous. So that, I believe, is the hardest job than getting a ceasefire in the first place. So in all of this conflict, the crucial question, again, the important question, what is in it for Pakistan? Of all the diplomatic maneuvers that it did, what is it in Pakistan's interest that Pakistan can seek or can get out of these negotiations? First thing, Islamabad needs to think about what it wants from this moment in the long term. This is a real opportunity to make Islamabad a serious venue for this, regional diplomacy, and also a serious conversation should be started on economic security as well. Look, at a political front, at a diplomatic front, we have done wonders, and what we did now is nothing less than doing something miraculous. But now, on the economic side of it, we are in doldrums. The Pakistani economy is basically at the mercy of IMF and some of the deposits by the GCC region. So what is it for Pakistan? How is Pakistan going to leverage this opportunity to seek economic benefits? Will Pakistan use this as an opportunity to seek some sanctions waivers so that Pakistan can address its energy needs and seek closer, nearer alternatives rather than going all the way across the oceans to procure their supplies, their vital energy lines? So this will be a crucial thing that the leadership in Islamabad and Rawalpindi should consider. Also, if Pakistan can sustain the diplomatic role that it has now over the coming months, it would be something really good for the region as well. So it needs to be capitalized on. It needs to have a realistic approach towards regional alignment and see where diplomacy can work or where diplomacy cannot work. So a reassessment of Pakistan's institutional capacity, intention, and also a prioritization of domestic national needs is equally important. Also, I say this as someone who has worked extensively in the government, have been part of many high-level forums. I think that Pakistan needs to invest in building the institutions that match this kind of ambition, because we might get lucky here with the presence of a general who has strong ties with Washington, but it might not be the case all the time. So in order for it to be sustainable, in order for it to be a continued effort, continued presence, getting us working on institutions, getting the trained people, having the strong legal capacity, and a professional infrastructure and overarching civilian institutions is what Pakistan needs in order to thrive permanently. Because an individual can come, it can have, he or she can have a direct relationship, personal ties with powerful people, powerful countries, but those personal ties hardly materialize for national benefits. They serve personal interest. So it's important that leadership in Pakistan, both military and the civilian, they should take this into account and invest in an institutional framework which can make this, or which can present Pakistan in a way that all such diplomatic engagements translate into economic successes, and also works in the overall strengthening of state infrastructure in Pakistan. So Pakistan has, to conclude with, Pakistan has given the world 14 days of peace. It's a great development. It deserves all the praise. It did it by using every relationship it has, every tool it has with Washington, with Tehran, with Riyadh, Beijing, etc. And by being willing to take the real risk, and this is something I emphasize on, that risk-taking institute among states is, I think, is going to be a defining character in the coming diplomatic arenas, because most countries are afraid to do that. Is this ceasefire fragile? 100% agreed, it is. And are the underlying disagreements resolved? Not at all. Is there a real chance it breaks down? Absolutely. So there is no false optimism. We have to be cautiously optimist without undermining the possibility that it can go south at any moment as well. But 14 days of peace is 14 days of peace. People are not being bombed. That's a win. The Strait of Hormuz is open. That's another win. Families in the Gulf are in a safer position than they were 2 weeks ago. Another major win. And Pakistan is hosting the next round of talks. A big win for Islamabad as well. Diplomatically, politically, like I said previously, all of this needs to be translated for something which will be in the collective interest of Pakistan. So that's it for the brief. If this helped you understand the situation in any way, please comment, like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much.